Alrighty, thank you. Hey everyone, welcome to the Sigstore community meeting. Tracy's out today, so I'll be leading the meeting. If you haven't been before, we'll start with a project round robin, just discussing the ongoing work. We'll discuss the GA effort a bit. If you have any other things to discuss, please add those to the agenda in AOB. And if you're a new community member, we'll have a little bit of time at the end for introductions. So let's dive right into things. First, Recor. Priya, did you have an update? Priya might be out. Okay. I will circle back.
Yeah,
so
Priya's
let's.
feeling sick. Sorry, I can do that one.
No worries.
Yeah, Priya and Carlos successfully did a shard in the staging environment. So give it a try. Seems to have gone pretty smoothly, and they updated a playbook. Yeah, I think that's all for Priya.
Fantastic. That is good to hear. Do you know, for any issues, was it significant enough that we'll want to do another sharding to exercise whatever the fix is, or was it a minor issue?
It was just they didn't know how to access a certain endpoint in staging. And,
okay.
That's just playbook stuff, basically.
Awesome. Eddie via Jason.
Yeah, Eddie brought this up but wasn't able to come. A couple weeks ago, maybe last week, but maybe 2 weeks ago, we talked about restructuring how Recor responses are specified so that it isn't dependent on a dynamic top-level key. Feel free to go read that issue for more information. He brought it up because we are quickly and hopefully very quickly approaching a GA for these things, and now might be a good time to make that change before GA. We don't have to have a full design discussion about what change and how and whatever, but if this is something you have hit and are annoyed by, let's use that anger to productively change this thing before GA. Or if we think we need to do this after GA, that's fine too, but a good, clear decision would be useful. That's all. I guess probably let's either talk about it in Slack or in that issue or later in this meeting if we want to.
I'll quickly chime in here since we've brought this up a little bit in some GA discussions. I think we'll couple this work with the gRPC rewrite because we don't want to make any breaking changes, I think, to the existing V1 API before GA. The question is, can gRPC get done before GA? There are some conversations right now about priorities. This is a pretty large feature, and I think we had initially discussed that we wouldn't include gRPC in the GA release. I'll let Bob or Dan chime in if they have any more thoughts on this, but that's kind of my initial feeling for this.
I guess I didn't realize there was so much anger. So shame on me, I guess, as the guy that wrote the code. I agree it's not optimal. I think it does mean, though, in the context of looking at what would that change fundamentally look like without the attaching it to the broader gRPC work. I guess I would be more concerned around multiple iterations and then where would clients ultimately end up in terms of consuming that change. But I guess open to, if folks have opinions or want to redirect energy into coming up with a path forward, they're totally open to the dialogue on that.
I think if gRPC is on the horizon and gRPC might fix it on the horizon even after GA and would fix it, I think that seems fine to me. I'm not in a huge rush, except that the gate on GA is closing, and then any change is harder to, not an impossible, but slower and harder to make. If gRPC is the answer to that, then that's fine, and I'll wait. Personally, for no one but me.
Just for everybody else's benefit as well, like we keep characterizing it as gRPC, but part of that is ultimately defining a revamped V2 version of the API in general that would offer both HTTP protocol support as well as gRPC. So we're not necessarily saying, hey, we'd have to make full-on client tooling changes over to that stack as well. It's more of just a, hey, we're gonna take everything we've learned about the API and the project, look to rebase it, and then ultimately rip out some of the code generation that we have based on the Open API spec that is quite bloated and not optimal for a set of other reasons. So gRPC is just one potential avenue to drive that conversation forward around the API evolution. But it's not just about us removing REST and replacing it with gRPC. That's not the intent here. So sorry, just wanted to be clear.
Yeah,
didn't have that context.
That's helpful clarity. Thank you for that. And if a V2 API is coming, I'll rephrase. If a V2 API is coming, I'm fine to wait for it myself. But if there wasn't and the gate was closing on GA, I think we would want to rush to get it through. In any case, just having an answer to the question is the ask, because it's just sort of that issue has just lingered there since we talked about it a couple weeks ago.
Awesome, thanks, Jason. I guess if anyone has any other comments on this, feel free to hop onto the issue and continue discussion. All right, let's continue on to Fulcio. Apu?
This is mostly kind of related to the previous question in that there is a V2 API for Fulcio that uses gRPC and exposes an HTTP endpoint. So, I mean, presumably the V1 API is going to be available in GA, and that's fine. But do we have a deprecation strategy to remove all this code and say, hey, clients should get off this in 1 year or 6 months? Or, I mean, I would say 6 months just so I can delete all that code, but there might be some existing policy that I'm unaware of. Or
so we do need to come up with an exact date. We have roughly said a year, but we will not add any new features to V1 to encourage folks to move on to the V2 API. Hopefully it shouldn't be a significant change. Once again, gRPC or HTTP works for accessing it. If you're writing a client, I'd recommend just using the V2 API that's at this point been rolled out with the production release that we did last week. So that is usable at this point. We mostly wanted to keep V1 around not to break anybody who was currently calling it. And that's why we'll probably roughly say a year after GA, but I agree that we need an exact date in place for when we'll drop V1.
sounds good to me.
Alrighty. Other thing I'll mention for Fulcio, this morning we released 0.5, which includes some internal code cleanup and a new API for fetching the configuration for Fulcio. Alrighty. Any updates for Cosign?
1.9 got released, which contains the important tough fixes. So I think we should be getting close to being able to try a new tough V3, but you probably know better than I do, Hayden.
Yeah, that I think we should still be able to use the V3 route without upgrading to Cosign. The fixes will help us with the, I guess now we'll call it the V4 signing, which Asra, Asra and myself, and I believe, I don't know if anybody else is working on this too. If you're interested, come chat with us. We're working through a few of the issues that came out of the postmortem.
Yeah.
Asra, did you have anything to add? Oh.
Yeah, the Cosign side of things is done with the 1.9 fixes now. Now there's a couple of cleanup things that I have to go through that issue and make sure are done, but everything else is on the root signing repo. So there are a bunch of issues on the root signing repo that we're starting to take care of these days. So check out that if you want to take one of those.
Awesome. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to us about how to get started on helping out with that. All right, Git sign.
I don't know if Billy is here. I just added a thing. There was a flurry of changes to account for some Sigstore changes. So if Git sign is not working for you, update to pass that change, and it should. That's all.
Awesome. Thanks for that update. And I believe also for Git Sign, there is a blog post that should be going out this week.
Right. Yes, there is. Also, I assume Billy's not here. He would have said something by now. But yeah, Billy wrote a blog post for the Sigstore blog that should go out soon.
Yeah, Billy is at CDCon, and I think he just gave a talk or something. So that's probably why he's missing this one.
That's excusable. We'll allow that. Alrighty. So somebody said Billy's out. Does anyone else want to speak on the policy controller?
The move is going to happen tomorrow, I think. Vile sent out, he staged it and tried it once and pushed it to a personal repo to make sure he preserved history and everything correctly. It looks pretty good, so he's going to go ahead and do that push to the new repo tomorrow. That's the big one. And then we'll be able to get it out to the cosign repo.
Awesome. Cool. Always a fan of some good code cleanup. All right. Java, Patrick, did you have an update?
Yeah, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Java was kind of trying to figure out, as part of our release process, for multi-module builds, you can have quite a large amount of artifacts that need to be signed. So we weren't quite sure if that was gonna meet Recore's expectations and like load capabilities. We got some information from Jason Swank from Even Central about like those artifacts, sort of the amount of published artifacts be hovering around 250,000 a week. So we just wanted to get confirmation that that's something that would fit. And by the sounds of it, the comments I'm seeing, that's going to be all right. So the benefit for us is just that we don't have to come up with some way of like aggregating releases and signing some kind of aggregate object instead.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of load, like a good amount, like a doubling or a tripling, not like a 200x or a 2000x or something like that. That would scare me. I think we chatted offline a bit. It's not like you're going to hit a switch and just slam us with this load either. It's it's going to be up to people actually slowly converting. So if we get kind of natural organic growth over months, I'm guessing up to this point, then nothing here is really scary. Now there's a separate effort to backfill signatures from existing Maven Central over here, which could be a lot more generated load, but we also have a lot more control over that. So yeah, that one we should talk about a bit more so you don't do like a million QPS during the backfill. But
yeah, one thing Jason Swank mentioned when we were talking about this last time is that he was more concerned about the verification load, and that actually kind of gave us some insight into the fact that the cosign tool is using offline verification, so that we kind of modified our design so that we're going to be storing we think we're going to store the whole bundle with the artifact on Maven Central so that we don't generate verification load.
Yeah, related to that point, Patrick, I think the Sigstore project itself should be a little bit more deliberate about giving advice there. I know, and I appreciate you being, one of the guinea pigs along with a bunch of the other intrepid adventurers who are struggling through this. But maybe as sort of your project wraps up, we can do a sort of retrospective and try to codify a lot of these things that you've had to figure out the hard way, and hopefully next time it'll be a little bit easier.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I want us to be sort of on parity with the other languages that are doing integrations here. And I could imagine, like, for instance, updating the like sign blob cosign docs to sort of give people an indication of doing that. Yeah.
Like one thing on the load, would it be possible to point it at staging just to see how the stack would look like? Like, I don't know how, like, would that be too confusing for people to use that for this, but it would be a good way to like ensure that we could handle the load before, even if it's to ramp up.
Yeah, Priya mentioned the same thing. I mean, let's talk about it. I don't really know how we can make that work, but for instance, maybe if we do the mass sort of signing, we could try that out on staging first or something like that.
Okay.
yeah, my understanding is this is just people that are going to be doing things differently after we publish a blog post or something like that. So it's not
Okay.
Yeah,
for them to do.
it's gonna be organic.
Yeah, if it's that, then yeah, staging would probably be too much work overhead for it. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Simon, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, does the signing flow fail open if Sigstore is down?
The signing fail open?
Yeah, like if I'm talking about like what we're planning to turn on here. If Sigstore is down, is the build just going to continue, or the signing process just going to, like, I'm wondering if we actually have a Sigstore outage, how does this manifest? Who does it affect?
There's no automated process that I'm aware of. I think that's still a point of confusion. This is just telling Maven users that they can sign with Sigstore, and so it's up to them however they actually do their signing.
But our client won't fail open if Sigstore is down. We'll actually break the releases.
Depends how people do like a Maven publish and a Maven sign. It's just a CLI tool we distribute.
Yeah,
Should
I mean,
we-
presumably they could just turn it off for that release or something.
Yeah, I wonder if we should give them the ability to fail open here because it's not actually released. And if we're in the process of going through upgrades, and we saw last week we had, significant issues where we actually generated bad log entries for a period. If people are actually taking a dependency on this in any kind of file closed way, then if something goes wrong, it's really good incentive for them to just turn it off and not do it again.
I can share a little bit the Kubernetes experience we just had. We had an older dependency on, I think it was cosign 1.6 in the Kubernetes release process. And there was a change upstream in Sigstore, and it ground the Kubernetes releases to a halt because we hadn't updated the documentation. It's too bad that Carlos isn't here because he was the actual person who fixed it last night. And yeah, we had to adapt, and we are improving the reliability of our release process just to make sure that whenever we find or have any communication problems with Sigstore, we can still run the releases. And but yeah, I mean, it's a cost benefit in the end.
I'm just concerned about reputational damage here. Like if we're turning this on and we're not GA and it immediately causes problems, and we're not like let's be really honest. Like the last 2 months, we've had two change, 2 releases and 2 issues. So we're not fully stable.
I don't think we're turning anything on. I think that's the tricky part. All we're doing is publishing a blog post and releasing a tool, right?
Is the tool integrated into Maven, or is it a separate tool
No,
for signing?
people would have to change their build to start using it. Right?
Yeah,
So
and we can have a fail open if we need to,
Yeah.
like it's just another step that can
I get
we can
sort of what
adjust
I'm
the
probing for
behavior.
here. Like, should the blog post say, this is still experimental, so here's how you make it fail open. Chuck.
Jacques.
Yeah, I appreciate where you're coming from, but it's kind of like one of those arguments that cancels itself out. It's just like it's bad that things go down because it's bad that things go down. I think in the long run, we're going to be relying less on maintainers being motivated by pure intentions and more by end user pressure to ensure compliance. So for example, in the Ruby proposal, we basically get to the point where if you have an unsigned gem, we make it very difficult for you to install it. Just to really place pressure. And it's imaginable that we would eventually reach a stage where we say the policy is now that if you are in the top X gems downloaded, that you have to be signed, just as we're doing with MFA.
I think that's a fantastic end goal. I'm just concerned about putting Sigstore into, actual user flows where it fails closed, given the state that we're not actually GA at the moment. Like it's we're if we publish something and say, hey, go and use it, it's ready to go, but we're not GA or we're not supporting it. And we've also had a couple of what we would term outages in the last couple of months.
If I was to rephrase it, what would you propose is the next action?
Well, I think it's a question for the room here. Like how comfortable are we announcing support for something when we're not GA and when the infrastructure itself isn't stable?
I mean, I think
If
it's
we
semantics and somewhat missing the point. Like, people are going to start taking dependencies on us whether we tell them or not, and they're going to complain when it goes down whether we told them to take the dependency or not. And so it's really on us just to make it stable. Like, if there's only so many warnings people are going to read and actually care about, we're going to have outages, and then we'll fix them and we'll get better over time. But stopping warnings and telling people not to use it doesn't really help when they're, like Jock said, they're going to be using it. They're going to be taking dependencies anyway. And we just need to acknowledge that and try to get stable as fast as we can.
Can we slightly mitigate this by having those who are taking dependencies note that like these features are in beta still? That we're just, as part of this is to avoid any sort of reputational damage where people go, oh, Sigstore falls over frequently, I'm gonna never come back to Sigstore, right? If we're saying that the service itself is effectively in beta, the features and the tooling that's using Sigstore should probably also still be in beta until we come out of beta into GA. So I think as long as that portion is true, that we very clearly document like these things are still in beta, there may still be some outages. We don't have an SLO. I'd at least have more confidence in this.
Should we carry this over into the Sigstore GA discussion that's coming up?
Yeah, if anyone, yeah, we can discuss this more here. I'll also note that we have a weekly meeting on GA where that can be another opportunity to have this conversation. All right, Dustin, did you have some updates for the Python client?
Hey, howdy, folks. Yeah, just quick updates on the Python client. We made a new release with SCT, embedded SCT support. That's out now. There's a lot of discussion happening. We want to provide an interface for verifying emails and identities together, or potentially additional extensions in the cert. So we're kind of blocked on some like upstream discussion that's happening in Coastline because we want to implement something similar and not just go off and do our own thing. So I appreciate folks weighing in on that. And we have a plan to start signing the CPython releases with Sigstore, starting with Python 3.11. So I'm actually later today going to sit down with the release manager and we're going to sign some stuff. So that's super cool. And I appreciate some eyes. Some folks have already reviewed this, but some eyes on that doc as well. It's just sort of a workflow for people that aren't super familiar with Sigstore and the tools using the Python client. And yeah, Zach.
Hey, yeah, great work on both those fronts, sort of the Python client front and the CPython doc. I'm really excited to see that rolling out. I would, I guess, urge you to try to figure out what an action on the notion of identity that you're using for verifying the Python releases is independent of Sigstore coming to some kind of, fixes everything conclusion here. And I'm happy to discuss with you offline if you want to brainstorm on what that might be, what a safe sort of future-proof approach might be. So I would urge everyone to weigh in on those issues, but I would also urge the Python folks to try to not block everything. And they're mostly related to me stirring the pot a little with sort of my takes on what actually is the notion of identity that we are attesting to in Sigstore. So very interesting discussions, but yeah, that's I guess my take there.
Yeah, I mean, so the TLDR is we want to provide some UX around verifying things other than just the cert email and the cert issuer, and we just want to figure out what that should look like and then make it user friendly. So cool, thanks there.
Thanks, Dustin. So yeah, folks want to hop on to these issues, discuss more there. I'm definitely a fan of having the clients all be in sync in terms of what they're offering. Sigstore GA. Kenny, did you want to give an update?
Yeah, so last week we did our cluster migration. We're and the entire production environment is now codified. So it's like we're no longer YOLOing our changes into production of some random box. So that's great. We did unfortunately discover some issues with our configurations during the migration process. So there is some amount of cleanup we have to make. So we're in the process of doing more documentation with playbooks and making our infrastructure a bit more robust for things like that. But yeah, so that's the quick update. We're still on full seal Recore 0.5. We're waiting for a couple of changes for the sharding as well as whatnot to come out. So we're waiting on another Recore release before pushing the latest version of Recore to production. Full CO 0.5 should go out roughly in around the same time frame of that.
Awesome. Thanks for the update. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to chime in on GA?
I think the GA timeline I think is still pending on the TAC meeting later this week on what exactly do we want GA to be. So the timeline is still roughly in the air. I think we're still hoping for a initial like pre-announcement of GA. Jack?
Yeah, I sort of bulldozed signing out of the way earlier, and I want to sort of bulldoze back in. So I guess one question is, would we set something like an SLO target that we have to meet before we announce GA?
SLO is expected to be a part of GA. I would say it is best practice that we are meeting that SLO for some time before we officially go GA. I think that point might be up for discussion a little bit, since that would definitely postpone GA a little bit, and we have to discuss how long we want to confirm that we're meeting our SLO. Simon, do you want to chime in?
I added a link to the actual SLO doc that we drafted for GA. You could take a look and add comment if you want there. Sorry, Simon.
Yeah, that's on SLO. If you look at just last week, we lost however many hours of transparency log entries because of an issue, which should count against SLO, right? So I don't think we're actually
lost the entries, did we?
They were recorded with the wrong issuer. So
well, there were two issues, right? There was that the search index wasn't available for some time, which we could consider a temporary loss, but I think would still count against SLO. And then there was that certain certificates were issued with the wrong issuer value in the extension, which I think we'd have to figure out how to count that against the SLO.
It's effectively data corruption or data loss, right? It doesn't. If you write the data and you get a success, but the data's wrong, that's still an outage.
It's different than stuff disappearing from a transparency log.
Wrong. We can argue about that, but wrong is sometimes even worse than disappeared.
Sure.
So, I think, looping back to my point before, I don't think we're close to meeting an SLO, given last week and the tough outage we had a month ago. Right? We've had two attempts at releasing configuration or binaries, and 2 lots of outages.
So
and
can we flip this around to the constructive side of what we actually have to do to improve stuff?
Yeah, I think the goal here is get to a state where we don't just have the SLO defined, but we can demonstrate that we meet it. And that involves getting the change management process in place and demonstrating that we can go through regular releases at some cadence for some amount of time. And over that period, we also demonstrate that we meet an SLO. And I think the work that Kenny's doing to start document the release process is great. And then, but we also need to build that muscle of, hey, let's do this weekly. But I, you know, I'm not being negative here. I just want to make sure that we recognize we've tried to make a couple of changes, and we found things that weren't discovered in tests, and we found things that weren't discovered in staging. They just went to production, and you know, we were surprised. So like those kinds of issues in security infrastructure are super problematic. And there's a good amount of work that we need to do to make sure that we can reliably release this thing without causing those kinds of problems. And so looping back to the original discussion again, how comfortable are we announcing, hey, go and do this to our users? Like, just go start using it, when we, like, we're in a state where we're not sure whether we're going to go GA in a month or 2 months, or how long it's going to take to sort of converge. That's the question that I had for the community.
This might be something good to mull over to, and maybe bring this up in one of the working groups that involves a lot of the community members, for example, potentially around the securing software repositories, having a little discussion on reliability. That might be a good place to loop in some more folks too. Kenny?
Plus one to everything Simon said. I think the harder part in the open source community is finding people to actually do the work to raise the bar to where you want, because it's always a chicken and egg problem. It's like, engineers, we want to make it perfect, and then, well, you could take forever to make the perfect thing, but you don't get users. So it's like, not to say I don't, like, I totally believe we need to do all of these things, but then I'm always worried about if we push it out too long and no one actually wants, by the time we're actually fully ready and no one wants to use this by then because there's another competitor, then all our efforts for naught. So it's like, I think it's a fine balance. And for, like, especially with demonstrations, it's like, yes, it will get better. It's a learning process. And the hardest part is getting people to work on all these things that we need done to improve things. Because whether it's writing tests, having on call, none of this are glamorous community work that people are eager to volunteer for, unfortunately. So unless we have dedicated resources from a big company to back it up, I'm just worried that we end up setting the bar so high that we never end up going GA. Like even internally, when I was at Google, it's always like the SREs and engineers always wants a higher bar than what the PMs and managers want. So I just not to say we shouldn't do it. I'm totally on the side of doing it. I'm just trying to be mindful that community open source projects dies all the time just because there's a lack of users. And so if we don't encourage people to use it because we don't feel it's robust enough, it ends up no one's using it, and someone else does something that might not be as good, but they are still pushing harder from it. And again, I don't think the strongest technical solution always wins. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other comments? Otherwise, we'll continue on to AOB.
Very quickly, just something simple like 2 releases or 2 months or something like that. You know, it doesn't have to be a super long time. I see where you're coming from, Kenny, but I'm not as concerned about getting to the market first. I think there's so much momentum behind Sigstore at the moment. But I appreciate that we do want to get it out eventually. We don't want to sit on it forever. So I think a reasonable compromise would be something like 2 releases are successful or 2 months would be a reasonable stretch to let us say it. And if, you know, I think we're probably thinking about timing an announcement for the OSS, the open source summit that's coming up. And we can still say that on stage. We can say we're going GA, you know, by this date if everything's met. You know, the little asterisk in the tiny type saying if we meet our SLOs for this long. That would be my suggestion.
cost one to that. I think proving to ourselves that we can upgrade this thing and operate it for some period of time is pretty good evidence.
And just to put some things in perspective, like Dustin, since you're on the call, does PyPy provide any kind of SLO? Like I don't see one there, or I don't see one for Maven Central. There's a Hacker News article right now saying GitHub doesn't provide one for free stuff.
Yeah, no SLO.
Right.
Get what you're for.
So yeah, we're not significantly worse than the infrastructure that people are using this alongside of, I guess, today. We should aim to be better, but we're not significantly worse. They all have outages themselves too.
I think sort of I agree that's the concern. My framing of this always is this reliable security infrastructure. Right? If you make a mistake in security infrastructure, the consequences can be really bad. So people really care about reliability and security infrastructure when they don't have it. If you don't offer it and things go bad, that's you lose a bunch of reputation. If everything's reliable, then they don't care.
+1, totally agree. We just need more people to actually help out with the effort.
I'll just say we've got a GA meeting right now on Mondays. We could consider turning this into a larger meeting with more folks involved if there is some interest in it. Right now it's a mix. Right now it's primarily about the details around things. I'll also say that we're planning on distributing the prioritization list once that is finalized and discussed more with the tech. So definitely would like input from clients on if we've got the right priorities going forward. All right, let's continue on. AOB, Zach, did you want to mention the skip meeting?
I also posted about this in the Slack, so feel free to search for that term SCITT in there, and there will be all the details. But there is an IETF, I guess, proto working group. It is not a W capital G working group, but there is an effort within the IETF to do some things like have transparency logs that track components of a supply chain, and also does some reasoning about notions of identity and so on. And if that sounds a little bit familiar to Sigstore, it's because they're interested in a very fundamentally similar problem. So I think that's been an interesting group. I've been following it from a distance, and they have some fun ideas over there. They are interested in doing a BOF, a birds of a feather session, which is sort of an IETF term, meaning get a bunch of people who are all interested in the same problem in a room and talk about that problem and what sort of solutions might look like. I think the Sigstore community is in a great place to sort of come and productively contribute there, sort of talk about our experience and actually rolling something that meets many of these goals out, and sort of decide whether we can what sort of the long-term path for that group might look like. So yeah, so I'm planning to personally attend. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. If any of y'all want to show up, it's open to everyone.
Awesome, thanks, Zach. All righty, any other AOB? Sweet. All right, now comes the part about introductions. So if you're new to the community, feel free to speak up, totally optional, and say hi. I guess we'll start with Eric.
Hey everybody, my name's Eric Smalling, dev advocate, as it says, I'm with Sneak. I know a few of you from met several of you at KubeCon and from other similar universes we've worked with in the past, and I just finally got off my butt and started to join the meeting.
Welcome. Is there anybody else new that would like to say hi?
Hello, I'm Mihai. I joined the Google Open Source Security team last week with Hayden and Apu and so on.
Welcome. All right, anyone else? Awesome. Well, I'll just say again, if you're new, join the Sigstore dev group, and that'll give you access to the community notes and the calendar invite for the community meetings. Thank you everyone for coming today. Kenny, would you be able to stop the recording?